The door clicked shut behind Sarah as she wheeled her suitcase toward the waiting taxi for yet another week-long business trip to New York. I stood in the doorway of our quiet Chicago suburb home, expecting the familiar weight of silence to settle over me like it always did, but then the doorbell rang, and there was Roman, my 25-year-old stepson, holding 2 grocery bags with that easy smile that somehow made the empty house feel less hollow. "Hey, Lincoln, thought you might want some company tonight," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an answer, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I watched him unload fresh vegetables and a bottle of that craft beer I liked into the fridge, his broad shoulders moving with quiet confidence, and for the first time in months the loneliness that had been gnawing at me since Sarah's trips grew more frequent actually eased. We had been a family for 10 years, ever since I married Sarah when Roman was just 15, a quiet kid with a quick mind who had lost his biological father young. I had tried to be the steady presence he needed, coaching his soccer games, helping with college applications, and never once treating him like anything less than my own. But lately, with Sarah gone 3 weeks out of every month, Roman had started showing up unannounced each evening, cooking simple dinners or fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom, things a son might do yet somehow carried a deeper weight. That first night we sat at the kitchen island eating pasta he had made from scratch and talked about my latest project at the accounting firm where deadlines were crushing me. "You carry too much alone, Lincoln," he said, his blue eyes steady on mine. "Let me help while Mom's away. No big deal." I laughed it off, but something in his tone lingered long after he left around midnight. The next evening he was back again, this time with a movie he knew I had wanted to see. We settled on the couch, the same one Sarah and I had picked out together years ago, and as the credits rolled, Roman turned to me. "You seem different these days, more tired. Everything okay at work?" His concern felt genuine, not the polite check-in of a stepson, but something warmer. I found myself opening up about the pressure, the endless spreadsheets, the fear that at 42 I was somehow stuck in a life that no longer fit. He listened without judgment, nodding and offering small insights from his own job as a graphic designer downtown. When he finally stood to leave, he squeezed my shoulder just a second longer than necessary. "I'll be here tomorrow too if you want." I nodded, not trusting my voice, because for the first time the house didn't feel empty when he walked out. By the third night, it had become a quiet routine. Roman would text around 6 asking what I felt like eating and arrive with ingredients or takeout. We talked about everything from childhood memories to current news, and I realized how rarely Sarah and I had conversations like this anymore. Her calls from hotel rooms were brief updates about meetings and flight delays, while Roman stayed until the late hours sharing laughs over old family photos on my phone. One night, after we had finished cleaning up, he paused at the door. "Lincoln, you know you can tell me anything, right? I'm not just some kid anymore." His words hung in the air, and I felt a strange flutter in my chest, something I quickly pushed down as gratitude. After all, he was my stepson, the young man I had helped raise, and this was simply him stepping up while his mother was away. Yet as I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, the comfort of his presence lingered like a promise I didn't yet understand. The 4th evening brought rain that drummed against the windows, turning our suburb into a misty cocoon. Roman arrived soaked, laughing as he shook water from his hair, and we ended up making chili together side by side in the kitchen, our elbows brushing occasionally. "Remember when I burned the first batch you taught me to make?" he asked, grinning. I did remember, and the memory brought a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Over bowls of steaming food, he asked about my dreams, the ones I had buried under marriage and mortgage. "What would you do if you could start over, Lincoln?" The question caught me off guard, and I hesitated before admitting I sometimes wondered what life would look like without the constant pressure to be the perfect provider. He didn't push, just listened, and when he left that night, he hugged me briefly, the kind of hug that felt solid and safe. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart beating a little faster than it should. It was just relief, I told myself, just the simple joy of not being alone. But deep down, a small voice whispered that something was shifting, something I wasn't ready to name. As the week progressed, Roman's visits became the highlight of my days. He helped me reorganize the garage, sorted through old tax papers, and even fixed the flickering light in the hallway, all while keeping the conversation light and easy. One afternoon, he convinced me to take a walk around the neighborhood park where we had played catch when he was younger. The sun broke through the clouds, and for a moment, standing there with him, I felt lighter than I had in months. "You're good for me, Roman," I said without thinking. He smiled, that quiet smile again. "You're good for me too, Lincoln." More than you know. The words carried a weight I couldn't quite place, but I let them settle because for the first time in my adult life I didn't feel like I was performing a role. I was simply me and he was simply there. By the end of Sarah's trip, I had grown so used to Roman's presence that the thought of her return filled me with a confusing mix of guilt and reluctance. When she called to say her flight was delayed another day, I caught myself smiling. Roman arrived right on time with Thai food this time, and we ate on the back porch talking until the stars came out. Thanks for everything this week, I told him as he prepared to leave. He turned back, one hand on the doorframe. Anytime, Lincoln. I mean it. His eyes held mine a fraction longer, and in that moment the air between us felt charged with something unspoken. I shook it off, closed the door, and told myself it was nothing, just a stepson looking out for his stepdad. But as I climbed the stairs to bed, the house felt different, fuller somehow, and I wondered how I had ever managed the quiet nights alone. Sarah finally returned on Friday evening, exhausted from the long flight but full of stories about client dinners and city lights. I greeted her with the usual kiss on the cheek and helped carry her bags upstairs, all while my mind kept drifting back to the easy rhythm Roman and I had fallen into. She noticed the cleaner kitchen, the fixed lights, and raised an eyebrow. Roman's been helping out, I see. That boy is a saint. I nodded, agreeing too quickly, and changed the subject to her trip. That night, as we lay in bed, her breathing steady beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every shared laugh, and feeling a strange emptiness now that the routine had broken. Monday came, and with it, the familiar grind at the office where my boss piled on more reports and tight deadlines. By evening, I was drained, yet when the doorbell rang at 6:30, my heart lifted. Roman stood there with a six-pack and a pizza box. Figured you might need a break after Mom got back, he said, stepping inside like he belonged, which in a way he did. Sarah was out at her book club, so we had the house to ourselves again. We ate in the living room, talking about his latest design project for a tech startup and how the creative freedom excited him. You always seem so sure of who you are, Roman, I said halfway through my second slice. I envy that. He set his beer down and looked at me seriously. It wasn't always like that, Lincoln. There were years I hid parts of myself because I was scared of what people would think. I waited for him to elaborate, but he just smiled softly and asked about my day instead. The pattern resumed quietly. On nights Sarah had late meetings or traveled again for shorter trips, Roman would appear with dinner or a board game we used to play when he was younger. Our talks grew deeper. He told me about the friends he had made in college, the ones who had stood by him through tough times, and I found myself sharing things I had never told Sarah, like the way my own father's expectations had shaped me into someone who always put duty first. You don't have to be that person anymore, Roman said one night as we sat on the porch swing, the summer air thick with the scent of lilacs. His voice was gentle, almost tender, and when our eyes met, I felt a pull I quickly attributed to gratitude. He was family after all, the kid I had watched grow into a kind, thoughtful man. A misunderstanding arose the following week when my brother Jake stopped by unannounced. He found Roman and me laughing over old photo albums on the couch and raised an eyebrow. You two sure are cozy these days, he joked, but there was an edge to it. Later, when Roman had left, Jake pulled me aside. Lincoln, everything okay with you and Sarah? You seem different. I brushed it off as work stress, but his words lingered like a warning. That night alone, I replayed the conversation and wondered why Roman's presence felt so essential now. Was I relying too much on him? Was this crossing some invisible line? The questions kept me awake until I heard a soft knock at the front door. Roman stood there in the rain. Couldn't sleep. Thought maybe you couldn't either. We ended up talking until 3 in the morning about nothing and everything, and when he finally left, I felt anchored again. Work pressure mounted, and one afternoon I snapped at a colleague over a minor error. Driving home, I felt the weight of it all crashing down. Roman was waiting on the porch with coffee and a listening ear. Let it out, Lincoln, he said, and I did, pouring out frustrations about feeling trapped in a life I had built but no longer recognized. He didn't offer solutions, just sat beside me, his presence steady and warm. When I finished, he placed a hand on my knee for a brief moment. You're allowed to want more. You deserve it. The touch was innocent, yet it sent a spark through me that I couldn't ignore this time. I pulled away quickly, blaming fatigue, but the feeling stayed with me long after he drove away. Sarah noticed the change too. You and Roman have gotten so close lately, she said one morning over breakfast, her tone light but curious. It's nice to see you smiling more. I smiled back, but inside guilt twisted. Was I hiding something even from myself? That evening Roman arrived with tickets to a baseball game, the Cubs versus the Cardinals, and we spent the night cheering in the stands shoulder to shoulder like old friends. On the drive home, he turned down the radio. Lincoln, I've been thinking a lot about what you said about starting over. What if the life you want is closer than you realize? His words hung between us and I felt my chest tighten. I changed the subject, but the question echoed in my mind all the way home. The following weekend Sarah left for a quick trip to Boston and Roman's visits intensified. We cooked together, watched documentaries, and even planted herbs in the backyard garden Sarah had abandoned. One evening as the sun set painting the sky in oranges and pinks, Roman turned to me. You know, I've always looked up to you, Lincoln. Not just as a stepdad, but as the man who showed me it was okay to be myself. His honesty touched something deep inside me, and for the first time I allowed myself to wonder what it would feel like to live without the constant pressure to fit a mold. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. As July turned to August, the bond between us had grown into something I could no longer label simply as family support. Roman's laughter filled the empty spaces Sarah's absence left, and his quiet strength became my anchor. Yet, with each passing night, a new awareness stirred questions I had never asked myself before. Who was I really when no one was watching? And why did Roman's presence make that question feel so urgent? The misunderstanding exploded on a humid August evening when Sarah returned early from her Boston trip and found Roman and me deep in conversation on the back porch, sharing a bottle of wine. She smiled at first, but later in our bedroom she asked pointedly, "Is there something going on between you two? You've been spending an awful lot of time together." I reassured her it was nothing, but the seed of doubt had been planted in her mind and in mine. The next day at work I received a concerned call from my sister Emily, who had heard from Jake. "Lincoln, people are starting to talk. You and Roman, just be careful, okay?" Her words stung because they echoed the very thoughts I had been pushing down. That night Roman arrived, as usual, sensing my tension immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down the Chinese takeout. I told him about Sarah's question and Emily's call and watched his face tighten. "I'm sorry if I'm causing problems, Lincoln. I never meant to make things awkward." His voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard before, and suddenly I wanted nothing more than to reassure him. "You're not the problem, Roman. You've been the best part of these months." The words slipped out before I could stop them, and the air between us thickened. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Because I care about you more than I probably should." We ate in silence after that, but the conversation lingered. Later, as we cleaned up, our hands brushed over the sink, and neither of us pulled away immediately. I felt my pulse quicken and stepped back, quickly muttering about the late hour. Roman left shortly after, but not before saying, "I'll see you tomorrow unless you want me to stay away." I told him to come and spent the rest of the night tossing in bed, replaying every moment, every glance, every word. Was I imagining the connection, or had it always been there waiting for me to notice? The following week brought a work crisis that nearly broke me. A major client account slipped through my fingers due to a calculation error, and my boss called me into his office for a stern warning. Driving home, I felt like a failure, the man who had always prided himself on control now unraveling. Roman was waiting in the driveway, his truck idling. "I heard from Mom you had a rough day. Come on, let's get out of here." He drove us to the lakefront where the city skyline glittered across the water. We walked the path talking through my fears, and for the first time I admitted out loud that I wasn't sure I wanted the life I had built anymore. Roman stopped walking and turned to me. "Then change it, Lincoln. You're stronger than you think." His faith in me was like a lifeline, and without thinking I pulled him into a hug. He held me tightly, and in that moment everything felt right. The misunderstanding deepened when Roman's old college friend Alex showed up unexpectedly at the house one evening looking for him. Alex, a confident young man with sharp features, glanced between us and smirked. "So this is the famous Lincoln. Roman talks about you non-stop." The comment was innocent enough, but Sarah overheard and later asked Roman directly if there was more to our friendship. He deflected smoothly, but the tension in the house grew. That night after Sarah went to bed, Roman texted me, Can we talk? We met at the park down the street, and under the streetlights he confessed, Alex was just joking, but I think your family is starting to see what I've known for a while now, Lincoln. I care about you in a way that goes beyond family. His words hung heavy, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply nodded and walked him back to his truck, my mind spinning. Sarah's suspicions led to a quiet argument the next morning. I'm happy you and Roman are close, but it feels like I'm the outsider now, she said, her voice tight. I reassured her again, but the guilt gnawed at me because deep down I knew she was right in a way I couldn't explain. Roman arrived that evening with flowers for Sarah and a calm demeanor that diffused the awkwardness. We spent the night playing cards, all three of us, and for a few hours everything felt normal again. Yet when Roman left, Sarah turned to me. He's a good man, Lincoln. Just remember who your family is. Her words echoed in my head long after she fell asleep. The climax of the tension came during a family barbecue at my parents' house in the suburbs. Jake made a passing joke about Roman and me being joined at the hip, and my father chuckled, but Emily shot me a worried look. Roman handled it gracefully, changing the subject to football, but later in the backyard he found me alone. I don't want to cause problems for you, Lincoln. If I need to step back, I will. The sincerity in his eyes broke something inside me. Don't, I said quickly. I need you here. The admission felt dangerous and liberating all at once. He smiled softly, and for the first time I allowed myself to see the man standing before me not as my stepson but as someone who truly saw me. Driving home that night with Sarah dozing in the passenger seat, I glanced in the rearview mirror at Roman following in his truck and felt a surge of emotion I could no longer deny. The internal conflict raged louder than ever. Was this friendship or something deeper? Was I willing to risk everything I had built for a feeling I barely understood? The questions kept me awake until dawn, but one truth emerged clearly. Roman had become my safe harbor, and I wasn't ready to let go. The confrontation I had been dreading arrived on a stormy September evening. Sarah had left for another overnight trip, and Roman and I were watching a documentary when he suddenly paused the TV. Lincoln, we need to talk about what's happening between us. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. I froze, my heart pounding as he continued. I've been in love with you for years. Since I was 20 and realized the feelings I had weren't just admiration. Every night I've come here, it's been because I couldn't stay away anymore. The words landed like thunder, and I stared at him speechless, the room spinning. All the late nights, the shared meals, the hugs, they suddenly made sense in a way that terrified me. I stood up, pacing the living room, my mind racing through every memory, every moment I had dismissed as innocent. Roman, you're my stepson. This can't. He rose to his eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. I know what people will say. I know the risks. But I also know how you look at me when you think I'm not watching. You feel it too, Lincoln. Don't you? I wanted to deny it, to push him away, but the truth rose unbidden. The comfort, the spark, the way his presence made the world brighter, it was more than family. It was love, a love I had been too afraid to name. Tears stung my eyes as I admitted, I think I do. God help me, I think I do. The argument that followed was raw and honest. He spoke of years spent hiding his sexuality from Sarah and from me, fearing rejection. I confessed the emptiness in my marriage, the way I had always felt something missing but never understood until now. We talked through the night, the storm outside mirroring the one inside me. By morning we sat exhausted on the couch, his hand inches from mine. What do we do now? I whispered. We don't have to decide everything today, he said gently. But I can't keep pretending, Lincoln. And I don't think you can either. The following days were a blur of stolen moments and quiet conversations. Roman came over every evening, and we explored the new reality between us carefully, never crossing physical lines but allowing the emotional truth to breathe. I found myself smiling more at work, daydreaming during meetings, and feeling alive in a way I hadn't since my 20s. Yet guilt shadowed every joy. Sarah noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay. I lied, saying it was work stress, but each lie chipped away at me. One afternoon, Roman and I drove to a quiet spot by the lake and sat on the hood of his truck watching the water. I'm scared, I admitted, of losing everything, of hurting Sarah, of what people will think. He nodded, understanding. I am too. But I've lived scared for too long. You taught me to be brave, Lincoln. Now let me help you be brave too. A new conflict arose when Roman's ex-boyfriend reached out wanting to reconnect. The news hit me harder than I expected, jealousy flaring hot and unexpected. He's just a friend now, Roman assured me, but the misunderstanding lingered until we talked it through one night on my porch. There's no one else, Lincoln. Only you. His words healed the doubt, and in that moment I realized how deeply I had fallen. The identity crisis deepened as I researched LGBTQ resources in secret late at night, reading stories of men like me who had found courage later in life. Each article felt like a mirror, and slowly the fear began to transform into resolve. Family pressure mounted when Emily invited us all to dinner and casually mentioned a family secret she had overheard. The conversation turned tense and I deflected, but later Roman pulled me aside. We can't hide forever. The truth always finds a way. He was right, and the weight of it pressed on me daily. At work, a colleague made a casual homophobic joke, and I felt physically ill, realizing how much I had internalized those attitudes. That evening, Roman listened as I poured out my frustrations and then shared his own journey of coming out to friends in college. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. You deserve that freedom too, Lincoln. The turning point came during a weekend trip Sarah suggested to clear the air. We drove to a cabin in Wisconsin, but my mind was elsewhere. Roman texted me throughout the weekend, and each message reminded me of the life I truly wanted. On the drive home, Sarah asked directly, "Is there someone else?" Couldn't lie anymore. I think I'm figuring out who I am, Sarah. And it's not the man I thought I was. She cried but didn't press further, leaving me with the heavy task of deciding my next steps. Back in Chicago, Roman waited at my house, his presence a beacon. Whatever you choose, Lincoln, I'll support you. Even if it means stepping away. His sacrifice cut deep, and in that moment I knew I couldn't let him go. The internal battle raged for days, but each conversation with Roman brought clarity. We spoke of the future, the risks, the joy, and slowly I began to see a path forward. The man who had entered this summer lost and lonely was transforming into someone ready to fight for his truth. Roman's love had unlocked a door I had kept bolted for decades, and now there was no closing it. October brought falling leaves and a clarity I could no longer ignore. One crisp evening, Roman and I sat in my backyard under string lights he had helped hang weeks earlier. "I've made my decision," I told him, my voice steady for the first time in months. "I'm going to talk to Sarah. I can't keep living this lie." His eyes filled with tears, but he smiled. "I'm proud of you, Lincoln. Whatever happens, we face it together." We didn't hug or kiss, just sat side by side, letting the weight of the choice settle. The next morning, I asked Sarah to meet me at our favorite coffee shop downtown. Over lattes, I told her everything, the years of quiet discontent, the bond with Roman, the truth about my feelings. She listened, tears streaming, then stood up. "I need time, Lincoln. This changes everything." Her pain was a knife, but I knew honesty was the only way forward. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. Sarah moved into the guest room while we sorted logistics, and Roman kept his distance, respecting the space I needed. At work, I threw myself into projects, but the internal storm continued. One afternoon, my boss called me in after noticing my distraction. "Everything okay at home, Lincoln?" I almost told him the truth, but instead nodded and kept going. Roman's texts were my lifeline, short messages of encouragement that reminded me why I was fighting. "You're not alone," he wrote one night, and those 3 words carried me through. A major misunderstanding threatened to derail everything when Jake found out through Emily and showed up at my door furious. "What the hell, Lincoln? With your own stepson?" His words were harsh and laced with disgust. We argued on the porch until Roman arrived unexpectedly. "This isn't about you, Jake," Roman said calmly. "It's about Lincoln finding happiness." The confrontation ended with Jake storming off, but the damage was done. That night, Roman and I talked for hours about the societal pressure, the fear of losing family, and the courage it took to stand up. "I'm willing to lose everything if it means being true to myself," I told him, and meant it. Sarah and I had several long conversations over the following days. She expressed her hurt, her confusion, and her love for the man she had married. I listened and apologized for the pain I had caused but stood firm in my truth. I still care about you, Sarah, but I can't be the husband you deserve anymore. She nodded, eventually agreeing to start the separation process. The decision brought both relief and sorrow, but it also opened the door to the future I had been dreaming about. Through it all, Roman remained patient, never pushing, only supporting. We met secretly at the lakefront on weekends, talking about everything from moving forward to the small joys we wanted to share. One Sunday, as the sun set, he took my hand for the first time openly. "No more hiding, Lincoln. We've earned this." The touch was simple yet profound, and in that moment all the sacrifice felt worth it. My identity crisis had transformed into a quiet strength I carried with pride. The family dynamics shifted slowly. Emily reached out first, offering cautious support while my parents struggled but promised to try. Roman's mother Sarah had her own journey but eventually told him she wanted him to be happy. The external conflicts tested us, but each challenge strengthened the bond between us. I began attending a local LGBTQ support group where men shared stories similar to mine, and for the first time I felt seen. As November approached, the leaves had all fallen, and with them the last of my old life. Roman and I planned a small trip to California for the holidays, a chance to breathe away from the chaos. The decision to separate from Sarah was finalized amicably, and I moved into a small apartment downtown closer to Roman's place. The transition was painful but necessary, and each night we talked on the phone until sleep claimed us. The growth was undeniable. The man who once feared his own heart now embraced it fully. Roman had been my guide, my mirror, and my love, and together we faced the unknown with hope. The journey was far from over, but for the first time I felt truly alive. December in California felt like a new beginning. Roman and I walked along the Santa Monica Pier, the ocean breeze carrying away the last remnants of doubt. We had chosen a small Airbnb with a view of the waves and spent our days exploring, talking, and simply being together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and pink, Roman turned to me. "Lincoln, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. Thank you for choosing us." I pulled him close, the embrace filled with all the emotions we had held back for months. "You saved me, Roman. You showed me who I really am." In that moment on the beach, with the waves crashing nearby, I felt the full weight of my awakening, the sacrifices, the misunderstandings, and the profound joy of living authentically. Back in Chicago, the new year brought fresh challenges and triumphs. Sarah and I finalized the divorce with mutual respect, and she even wished us well in her own way. Jake slowly came around after several honest conversations, and Emily became a steady ally. At work, I came out to my closest colleagues, and to my surprise found support where I least expected it. The identity I had fought so hard to accept became a source of strength, not shame. Roman and I moved in together in a bright apartment overlooking the city, a space that felt like ours from the first day. Our days filled with shared routines, morning coffee, evening walks, and deep conversations that never grew old. The love we had discovered through nights of quiet support had blossomed into something enduring and real. We faced societal stares and occasional comments, but each one only reinforced our commitment. Roman's career took off with a major project, and I found new purpose mentoring younger accountants who struggled with their own truths. One spring evening, we hosted a small dinner with close friends and family, the first time we openly celebrated our relationship. Laughter filled the room, and as I looked around at the faces that had walked this journey with us, I felt overwhelming gratitude. The boy I had helped raise had become the man who helped me find myself. The path had been paved with pain and courage, but it had led us here to a love that refused to be hidden. Years later, when people asked how it all began, I would smile and think of those quiet nights when a stepson showed up with groceries and changed everything. The journey of two men learning to love openly in a world that didn't always understand had taught us both the true meaning of family, not the one we were born into, but the one we chose every single day. True or false? Sacrificing everything you thought you knew about love and family is always worth it if it means living your authentic truth.